Hi, this is Tom Soane, and I've got an update for any landlords about the eviction process because the government have just introduced some temporary changes to the new eviction process after the 23rd of August. Because I don't know if you remember, at the beginning of lockdown, the government introduced a 3-month ban on all evictions from taking place. So if you'd issued a Section 21 notice or a Section 8 notice, then you would have to extend the notice period by 3 months. You couldn't get into the courts during that eviction ban either. To gain an eviction order or a repossession order, you couldn't get into the court. Then the government extended that ban by another 2 months up to the 23rd of August this year. And that ban is coming up to an end now. So when we come out of that ban, there's going to be this massive bottleneck of cases that need to get in front of the judges. And when the courts reopen, it's just going to be too much for them to handle. So the government have introduced some temporary amendments to, it's actually called the Civil Procedure Rules of 1998. Very catchy. They always name these things in a catchy way. So I wanted to tell you what those changes are, what you need to do if you're following or trying to follow an eviction process, whether you've issued the tenant a Section 21 or a Section 8 notice already, or you were booked in for a court hearing or a court case to get that eviction through. So first of all, you've got to inform the courts and the tenants in writing that you want to resume the proceedings against them. You can't go to court and have your hearing unless you've done that. Second thing, you've got to provide information about the tenant's current circumstances. And more specifically, you've got to advise the courts what the effect of COVID-19 has had on your tenants. Because the courts will need to assess the tenant's vulnerability, their disability, social security. They're trying to prevent anyone from who's vulnerable from being made even more vulnerable. You'll also need to produce a full history of arrears in advance of the hearing. Don't forget this stuff either, because if you've got a court date, they'll just cancel it. The courts are going to set this date after all of this information has been received. So, make sure you're getting this information first and then setting the court date. Because also the courts can suspend the hearing for up to 8 weeks. And that's really so that they can handle the capacity and the number of people that are going to need to get in front of the judges. So, of course, this is all to continue tenant protection and prevent homelessness, but it also is there to protect the courts. And I agree with it. I agree with both sides, It's no good having a ton of court cases if the courts can't handle it. So they need to be able to protect themselves, definitely. They also need to protect the tenants, of course. I mean, that's been happening a lot more and more and more now over the last decade. And I totally agree with preventing homelessness. But I think this is going to cause a bit of a problem for landlords. And I want to give you a story. If you imagine this for yourself, there was a landlord whose tenant hadn't paid the rent for 6 months before lockdown. 6 months. And that landlord's got mortgages to pay, insurances to pay. It's part of his income. But for 6 months. And then they were due to evict the tenant, and then lockdown hits. And then the eviction ban takes place. So there's a further 3 months ban. And then it was extended by another 2 months. And now that landlord's looking at another few months before they can actually evict their tenant. So, we're up to what? That's about 14 or 15 months. You guys work it out. But 14 or 15 months that landlord has not had any rent coming in. Now, look, don't get me wrong. They could probably go after the tenant in court and get that rent back. But we don't know the full circumstances. It might be a case that the the tenant's just fallen into difficulty. There might be a feasible story, but the rent's got to be paid. Anyway, I think it's going to cause a problem for a lot of landlords, especially people that have been waiting for this ban to be lifted and that haven't been receiving rent during this time. There's also going to be a problem for landlords that are trying to sell a property. And maybe you were trying to sell your property before lockdown happened, and maybe your sale has fallen through. If you're a landlord with a tenant in there, most often the buyer will want you to get rid of the tenant first. Okay, that's your choice. But if you haven't been able to remove that tenant, the buyer's probably not going to hang on for you. So if you're a landlord and you were trying to sell your property and you've lost that sale because you haven't been able to remove the tenant, or if you've had serious arrears with your tenant and this has caused bigger problems, then let me know. I'm happy to pick up the phone and have a chat with you over the phone to see if there's any way I can help and give you some advice, give you some solutions, some options. More than happy to do that. Or, hey, do you know what? I should probably use this to say about our landlord to landlord sales service. And it is what it says on the tin. It's one landlord selling a ready-made tenanted property to another landlord. And that saves everybody hassle. So anyway, I'm not trying to sell here. I'm just wanting to give you this update. Give me a shout. If you need any help or advice about this stuff, or if you know any landlords that are trying to evict a tenant, share this round, tag them, give them my details, tom@pinkstreet.co.uk. But what all of this means, I think, is that this is going to demonstrate to the courts and to the judge that you have tried to find a solution before going to the courts for an eviction. If you can provide all of those things, and just to recap, inform the courts in writing and the tenant in writing that you do wish to resume the proceedings, provide information about the tenant's circumstances and the effect of COVID-19 so that the courts can assess the vulnerability, produce a full history of arrears in advance of the hearing so that the courts can then set the date after the information's been received. And also remember, the courts can suspend the hearing for up to 8 weeks to handle the capacity. So I think all of those things demonstrate that you as a landlord have tried to find a resolution with the tenant or a solution to the problem before going to court. And that's really what they're assessing. Who do we need to see? And who do we need to see first? There are going to be much more serious problems and situations for some landlords than others. So I kind of agree with it. I'd like to know your thoughts. I think, yeah, of course, they've got to protect themselves. It's like the NHS all over, isn't it? You can't just have all of a sudden have tons and tons and tons and tons of people flooding into the NHS. It will overload it. It will make a complete wreckage of our courts, of the NHS, and it's the same with the courts. They need to make sure that they're able to give full attention to every case and they're not overloaded. And then on the tenant side, we're still not back to normal. There still aren't as many properties available to rent or sell or buy or whatever that there was. So if a tenant is being evicted and they need a place to go but they can't get to another place, then we're going to just cause homelessness on a big scale if we just evict everyone. So I hope that helps. Look, if you want me to give you any more clarity on your own situation, just grab your phones, type tom@pinkstreet.co.uk, or do you know what, just Facebook message me, anything like that. And I'm more than happy to help anyone I can who's currently having a situation with eviction. So I hope that helps. Speak to you all soon, everybody, and good luck.